Okay, all right, we're recording and there should be online or text-to-speech subtitles, hopefully, for the YouTube video. It's enabled for the main video, but I'm not sure if it is for breakout rooms. Hopefully it is, so if you're watching after the fact, hopefully you can see subtitles. And if not, we'll work on that for next time. But yeah, let's get into it. So if you haven't filled out the attendance, just scan that real quick. Give you, did you three do it already?
Is that the same one that was over there?
That's a good question. Yes, it is.
It is not the same.
Oh, it's not the same, really?
Yeah, this is for the lesson 4 and lesson 2.
Oh, I see. Gotcha. So yes, my bad. Please scan that. I guess I should have checked on that. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'll wait a bit more. Ready for a catch. All right, with that, okay, welcome to lesson 4. Today we're doing more ReactJS. Once again, there's the beginner track, but this is the lesson for intermediate. So we are right here, week 2 out of 5 content, and then 2 project days. So yeah, that's the difference between intermediate and beginner. Beginner only has, if they're at this point, they would only have 1 more lesson to go. So you guys have a lot more to do, which is cool, because then the final project will get to be more involved. So once again, help available every Wednesday starting at 6 for an hour. And then the recording session will be up, and you can also access for help anytime in Slack. And hopefully by now, everyone watching this is in Brightspace and in Slack. If not though, here's how you get into Slack, and then just DM Hadi to get into Brightspace. And also have a text editor, and there's a link to the GitHub. This week's is really important because I put a lot of stuff in there, so you want to follow along with that. And hopefully from lesson 3, you already have Node and NPM installed. If not, look at the lesson 3 slides. Those are also in Brightspace. And with that, let's get into the review. I know last week I didn't really go over HTML or CSS. I kind of figured you guys already knew it, but just to recap, HTML, it really is the foundation of the web. It's all about tags, and you create elements with those tags, and you use CSS to style those with the selectors and properties. So, and then for JavaScript, similar to C in Python, you don't have to define the type, but here we use let and const. You technically can use var, but please don't, because it can lead to bugs with like scoping problems and stuff. But yeah, the goal, JavaScript, interactivity, and make pages dynamic, which is really cool. And then JSX, this is what we covered last week. So for a review of that, it's basically just HTML and JavaScript. You can create reusable custom tags, which is very nice. And it's the foundation of React. And it can be styled just like an HTML tag can be styled using CSS. So with that, let's get into part 2, more React.js. So what is React? Well, it's a front-end framework. Basically, you can use it to create very dynamic and modular web pages. Modular meaning, you only create 1 component, but you can use it like 10 times. So very useful, and it's used by Facebook, or created and used by Facebook, and used by a lot of other companies as well. Okay, so the rules for React, obviously you're writing JavaScript, and each React project has usually called index.js, and you'll have this main React DOM.render function. It's included by default, and this is how React knows what to render and where to render it. So let me show this. This is the lesson 4 branch of the GitHub. I'm just in index.js, and as you can see, here's the React DOM.render function, and it accepts two values. One is the JSX to render, and then 2 is actually where to render it. So if you go into your public and then index.html, you can actually see where React is inserting itself. So you could call this, I don't know, you call it like test, and then you would just bind to, or you'd get the test ID. So it doesn't always have to be root. This isn't some magical line, there's purpose to it, just because it's called root by default. So there's that. And okay, and every component, it's also called custom JSX. We called it custom JSX last week because we hadn't really introduced much of React to begin with. But if you hear us call it, a custom tag or a custom component, those can be used interchangeably. They're the same thing. And they all need a render function. So, the template we give you by default, we're referencing component.js here. So as you can see, there's the render function. And from now on, we're going to be doing components the class way, not the function way. Function as in like this, how the app component is defined, because it doesn't use state, which we'll cover later. But for very simple components, you can use either, because under the hood, React treats a function component and a class component the same way. But let's see here, stuff is a bit different, which we'll get into. But yeah, basically include the render function and need to return JSX. And then let's get into some conventions. So all components that you're going to create should go into app.js. They shouldn't go in index.js. I know last week I showed you that you could add, let me open index.js again. You can add, you could add another component here and it would render, but that's not good convention. What you want to do is actually just add it in your app.js. Like I've shown for these demos, here are other custom tags that we have. So this is the proper standard for creating your own components. You don't really want to you won't ever really be writing any code in here, I don't think. And another convention, you'll see in the lesson 4 branch, all the components that we've written are in the component folder. Just another convention for React, so you should do that too. It's helpful for organization. And then now, what's the difference between React and JSX? Well, you can use React without JSX, but it's much harder and much less readable. So I would definitely recommend using JSX with your React. And you can pass props, which we'll get into today as well. And you can make each component different. And the components will be different, obviously, based on the data they're given. So setting up React, we did cover this in lesson 3. If you haven't watched that or looked at it, it's slide 18 that tells you how to create a project. But you also don't have to. Obviously, you can reuse your code from last week for this week. Okay, so let's get into props. So basically, you're passing data from a parent component to a child component. An example of a parent to child component would be, I guess here, app. The app component would be the parent, and then software would be the child component. So say we're passing a string, the day property from app to software. So that's one example. I'll show you that fully in the demo. So I'll get into that more later. But props can only be changed by the parent. They're read-only in the child that they're given. And they're passed like HTML attributes. And this is how you access it within the child component, this.props.name. Yep. Okay, so demo 1, I'll show you that fully now. So first, I want to highlight, obviously you do your npx create React app. That's how you create the project. If you need more information on that, go back to slide 18 of lesson 3. But then once you have your React project created, actually one aside I want to note, the reason I couldn't get the lesson 3 code to do npm start last week was because I didn't have the node modules folder. So if you have a project from like a repo that you didn't create, you have to do npm install first, and then Node is going to look at these packages and then install them and then create this really big node modules folder. And then after doing npm install, you can do npm start. I don't think direct directory though. Yeah. Npm start, and then it'll work correctly. So that's one thing that I didn't do last week that I should have. So I just want to let you know that. Okay, and then this is the results of our first demo. I'll show you how we got to this. Basically, it tells you the date, what lesson we're on, and what software we're learning. And so you can see we passed as props. We passed what day it was as a string and what date it was. So if we look in the software component, well, actually, first I want to highlight we're importing it. We're importing it here. And then in the software component itself at the very bottom, we're exporting it. So please don't forget those 2 steps. So this is what the software component looks like. You can see we're doing it the class way, so we need a constructor. And the point of that is to be able to use this keyword, you have to include this line right here. This line lets us use this keyword. So please never forget to set up the class to extend the React component class. And then within your render function, here we're getting the values from the props, putting them into local variables here, and then we're putting them in our JSX to show to the screen. So day and date, that would be this line right here. This is all, I think it was called the software component. Yep, this is the software component. Now let's get into the Saturdays component. Okay, for this one, it's basically the same, still a class component with a constructor. The only difference is I'm showing that you can use props directly in your JSX. You don't have to use a local variable like we did in software.js. So it's not like you have to do it this way, just showing the flexibility of it. But yeah, React inserts the data here in your JSX, and it is lesson 4 of the unit, and we are learning about React. So that was inserted there. So that's the syntax. Obviously, remember, use curly braces whenever you want to insert data. Same as always for JSX. And I believe that wraps up demo 1. So we're actually going to get into checkpoint 1 pretty early. So I want you guys to create a project if you haven't already, or just use an existing one. And the purpose of this, create 2 components, one being with props, one being without. And the purpose of, we're going to have 3 checkpoints today. The purpose of all 3, we're going to create some sort of card, kind of like a Pokemon card. This is an example. This is an example of the final project that Hattie made. It's very good. So you can see each of these is a single card. So today you'll just be focusing on 1. You won't be focusing on, getting like 20 or whatever. But this is show you what you're working towards, what you learned today, to be able to build on that in the coming weeks, to be able to work towards, getting this final result. So you can pull up a picture of a Pokemon card or some other card that you like. Just model your checkpoint off of that. Just have a header and an info, and use props. Basically, that's it. And don't forget to export them and import them into app.js, just like in demo 1. And once again, demo 1 code is going to be really helpful to help you with checkpoint 1. So be sure to check on that on the GitHub. And with that, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes. You don't have to do anything really complicated for your cards. Just do something simple. I don't know, difference between the header and the info component. But yeah, I'll say like maybe 10 minutes from now, we'll continue. One sec, I'll get to you. One sec. Let me just set the. Okay.
Like full,
How do you pull from it? Git clone.
I cloned the directory, but it still doesn't like. Go
Oh, you have to change branches? I believe you start on the master branch. Oh, unless
I don't know. Cloned the lesson 4 branch.
Yeah.
It doesn't like.
It's not showing up.
Yeah, it doesn't show.
That's what mine's doing.
Really? Did I push?
It's definitely up. It's definitely up there.
Oh, it is. You guys can see it. Okay. It should be like 39 minutes ago. You should see this push. So I did it kind of recently, but you can't see the code. Can I look at my-
Wait, Sam, did you clone the exact like?
So I cloned this.
I cloned like the main
lesson
one.
4. You did main. So you both did it both ways, and it didn't work either way.
Yeah.
Hey, Sam,
Yeah.
if they cloned it, make sure you check out lesson 4 branch.
Well, that's right. Yeah. In one of their cases, they probably should do that, but in the other case, they cloned straight from lesson 4 branch. So I think they would see.
Oh, that won't work. The actual cloning thingamabob on GitHub only clones the main repo, no matter which branch you're on.
Oh,
You
really?
still have to manually check out afterwards.
Then do like git branch to see what branch you're on real quick.
I did get checked out.
Well, first check them.
That's a master.
Yeah, you both are on masters.
And for everyone online, if any questions or at the demos or checkpoint, I'll be here to help you guys out there.
Lesson 4. Hey, you're already on. Yeah. I believe you do get check out lesson 3. I mean, lesson 4, sorry.
So just a new
Space
branch.
word
No
shell.
space. Yeah, try that.
It just says up to date. It just doesn't.
Hold on, let me see what it says.
How do you get checked out?
You're saying you don't have. this
Oh,
thing?
wait, that is good. Wait, should be on my.
You don't have.
So yeah, Ron, great question about props. So to do props, what you would have to do is kind of follow the demo code.
Oh, now we are.
Specifically, I think a good example would be like the first example, I think the software, the Saturdays components. But basically the way you do it is when you call the tag in your app.js file,
Yeah.
you'll kind of pass the prop in as an HTML attribute. So if you remember like attributes like, source or href, you'll kind of do that by saying the prop name equals, and in quotes, some value you want to pass in. And then in the component that you're calling that you want to use the prop within, you would say this dot props dot and then the prop name, and React will automatically replace that with the value of the prop.
Yeah, I did, yeah. I just added.
Oh, yeah, I
other
did.
JavaScript.
Why didn't you just work? So you clicked, actually, I should probably mute for people online. All right. Okay, so that was checkpoint 1. Okay, so now we're going to talk about state. So I talked with some of the people in person, but this is really the biggest reason why doing a component with the function, like in app.js, like this is different from doing it in your component JS. Because here we do it with doing it a class way. Let me just get rid of this. Okay, anyways, yeah, so state, like the name suggests, it's the internal state of a component. It's like a local variable, but the special thing, it's specific to only that instance of the component. So it's not like it's shared between all instances. It's only for that one instance. And when the state changes, the component will change, which is really nice. So state versus props, we just learned props. They both are ways to store data in component. But props are like parameters. It's a one-time data. It's one-time look at the data. So if your data is changing, you wouldn't necessarily want to use props. Basically, props is good because you might want to communicate between a parent and a child component. So that's where it's really good, sharing data between components. But then the state is really good if you're wanting to update your component a lot within itself. So here's how you do it. This is the special reason why using the class way of creating a component is very important. You use this.state equals and in curly braces. So you're getting an object here. You have key value pairs for the state variables you want to initialize. So state is set in the constructor, and then you use the set state function to add or modify the variables. You have to do it this way. You can't use this way outside of the constructor because React needs to know if your state changes. And this is the way to let React know if you're changing state. And another very useful thing here, you see we're updating the value of key here. We're doing nothing with key 2, but key 2 is not going to be overwritten. It's still going to exist there. And then key 3 is going to be added. So there's now going to be 3 key value pairs in the state object instead of 2. So it does not overwrite the second key. So now that brings me to demo 2. So I cannot see it. Okay, so show off state and props. Yeah. Okay, let me comment these out. I should have cleaned this up first. Sorry about that. Okay, so first thing you see here, we're passing a number as a prop. I just wanted to show that you don't always have to pass strings. We showed a lot of strings here, but you can pass numbers, or a variable could go here, or any valid JavaScript. And then once you go to the Purdue component, you can see we have the state constructor here. We have to do it after this line right here. You can't do line 6 before line 5 because line 5 lets us use this keyword. And here we have 3 keys: semester, year, and timestamp. Semester is static, year is taken from the props. So that shows that you can connect your props with your state actually, which is very nice. And you don't need this keyword when you're dealing with props here in the constructor. And then I'll get to the timestamp in a bit, but this is just the JavaScript syntax for that. But then what you'll see at the start is it is fall, I believe 2019, is that what we called it? Yeah, fall 2019. You'll see 2 instances of it, which is going to show you how state works, and we'll have the timestamp. And then I made a timer here, so it's going to update the state after 2 seconds. It'll change it to spring 2022, and I'll talk about the comments in a sec. So let me reload it. So you see it's fall 2019, and it just changed to spring 2022. And there is a difference here, only by 1 millisecond, but it shows that these 2 instances are separated from one another. They do not share the same timestamp data. So that shows they are not linked. And yeah, that's the demo of state. And basically, this is what I was talking about. This is the incorrect syntax. If you change state this way, you are changing the state object, but React won't know. You use the set state function to let React know that you're changing the state. That way it can recall the render function. And also note, you might want to update the state with like the current value of the state, let's say. Like, let's say you want to increment the year, like with some prop or something. You can do that, but you don't want to do it this way. The reason for that is because updating state, it may or may not be asynchronous. We'll get into that like a bit later, but basically it may not execute in the order that you would think it would. So to get around that, you do it this way. Instead of passing in an object into the set state function, you're actually passing in a function, in this case, an arrow function. And what it's going to do, it's going to give you the current state and current props objects, and they won't be changing. That way, whatever you put in here is guaranteed to run the way that you wrote it to run. Okay, so you're ensured that it will do this correctly. So, and also once you're in this scope, you don't use this because we actually imported or are including the actual state and props objects. So you don't use this. So that's the syntax for that. And it is all in lesson 4 branch. I know it's a lot of text, but it's there for you to look at. And also we put the link to the actual React documentation on this if you want to look at that, which is right here. So I basically just went over exactly what they're saying here, but they talk about it really well. So I would recommend reading the documentation if you ever have any questions. I believe that sums up demo 2 though. And with that, I think we get into checkpoint 2. Yeah. So what you're going to do is modify the card that you have. You're going to just, all you're going to do is add state variables. You want to add a timestamp that is displayed with your card. I know it says with each card. So if you're able to have more than one card, that would be awesome. But right now, just try like your initial go to just have one card and just have one timestamp with state, and you would just copy it the same way we did it here. Or you can modify it. I guess you could do this in props and then tie it to your timestamp like we did here. We connected the props with the state. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. But yeah, feel free to ask me and Heidi if you have any questions. And yeah, that is checkpoint 2. Okay, so that was checkpoint 2. Let's get back to there. Okay, so now we're going into adding user interactivity. So we're going to be using the onClick event like you would in HTML, with like a button. So you need 2 things for that. You need a function to call when you click the button, and you need this thing called a callback binder. This is something specific to React, and it's because React does not bind this keyword by default. So we need to do that for it. This is an example of a callback binder. What's happening is we're getting a function, and then we're binding the scope within that function to the scope of the class, or like, the scope outside the function, if that makes sense. So that way you can use this .state, this .props within your function. Because if you didn't do it like this, then you wouldn't be able to do that. You have to pass, I believe you have to pass props and state as variables. So that's callback binders. And then here's an example. So this in one. Okay. So it's in Boilermakers. Let me uncomment this. Okay, so first let me just show what's going on. You see, we still have the constructor. We've added some new stuff to the constructor though. we're still initializing the state, but we have this callback binder. Same thing I just talked about. We take the win game, that's a function, and we're binding its scope to the outer scope, like the other this scope. It's hard to explain, but we're binding the this of the function to the this of the class. That's it. And then what we're doing in the actual JSX, it's some normal tags, and then we have a button. When you click the button, it's going to call this win game. Also note, you don't want to put parentheses here, so don't accidentally add them. It breaks the code. Don't do that. But yeah, when you click it, it calls win game, and then all it's going to do, we're going to call set state. And you see, we're doing it the correct way. There was a right way and wrong way. Whenever you reference state, when you're updating state, you need to do it by giving set state a function. In this case, it's the arrow function. We're giving the state variable, and then that's how you update the number of wins, because since it's relying on itself to update. So please keep that in mind. That was going back to, I believe it was Purdue. Yeah, so see, we have, don't do it this way, do it this way. So that's what I'm referring to. There's a right way and a wrong way. So please make sure to do it this way. And you can obviously go back to the React documentation to make more sense of it. Yeah, let me just show you what it did. So here's our component, and then when you click on it, it's going to update the state. And so that's how you can create a counter. And then the cool thing to show that this is just an instance. What if we duplicate it? Now there's two, but it shows these are unlinked. They're not with each other. So that shows how the state variables work. That's something unique about state variables. You can just modify them within that instance of the component, even though these are the two same exact components. They're two different instances. So that's how state works. And yeah, big thing, the callback binder up here. That's the biggest thing to note. Weird syntax, but just copy that. Just literally the function name here again, and you bind this to it. So that's it. And with that, that takes us to checkpoint 3. I'll get back to that in a second because that is the last slide. So thank you all for coming. We'll give you more time to work on checkpoint 3 after that until it's time to go. But yeah, just give us feedback if you want, if you enjoyed it, if you have things to recommend us do better, just how you felt about the class. And yeah, thank you again.